Hey, I'm Mac, and we've got Baz with us as well. G'day, Baz.
Hello, Mac. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Now, I think we should start from the very start. Okay, let's talk about our backgrounds with media. Your media background stems from TV and stand-up comedy, right?
Correct. And then into commercial radio. So I did commercial radio for 5 years. And in that time, I also did some work with Southern Cross 10, doing a little bit of Vox Pops on the street for a show called State Focus in Queensland. And prior, I'd been doing community television for 3 years, and I'd also been doing stand-up comedy for probably around 7 years.
And my background, well, let's be honest, I was hanging around radio stations when I was 10 because my auntie worked at one, and then continued on, ended up finishing with 14 years on breakfast radio in regional Queensland. During that whole time, I learned a lot of stuff about people. One of my favourite things was communication. Having people's words out there, reflecting what the community was talking about, having a laugh with the community and being a part of it. What I've felt since I left in August 2020 is that we don't really have a sense of what's going on with the community anymore unless you're involved in the community directly. I feel like the people's voices have been taken away.
I feel that the communication now is very one way. Gone is the conversation. And it's very much, and I don't use the term dictated as in like a fascist regime or anything, but there's a narrative, particularly around this COVID issue, that is being dictated to us and being fed to us. And our voices and the voice of common people who just want to ask simple questions, who can't do that anymore because the narrative is so strong and it's so one way that you're portrayed as an anti-vaxxer or a tinfoil hat person when there's nothing wrong with just asking genuine questions.
Yeah, what has concerned me throughout 2020 to now, so we are on the last day of 2021 as of recording this, is that I'm not hearing enough from multiple medical people. I feel like, especially in Queensland, the Queensland government are taking control of all the medical advice. I'm not hearing from enough doctors. I'm not hearing enough different opinions.
I think one of the things that radio teaches us is that there is a diverse set of opinions out there, that you can put any topic out on radio, whether it be Coke versus Pepsi or McDonald's versus Hungry Jack's, or something as simple as, is a brown jumper better than a cream jumper? And you're going to get people who are going to react to that. And I think it's your radio instincts here that are serving you well, is that you've noticed there isn't a discussion anymore. You're not hearing pushback. All you're hearing is a state line. You're hearing this same narrative just being pumped through all the different stations, whether it be radio or television or print media. And you can sense that, wait a second, we're really not being asked about this, we're being told.
It feels like we're being lectured by our parents, and basically, here's what you have to do. If you don't do it, you're going to be punished for it. We're seeing it in Queensland with people that chose not to have a vaccine or inoculation or whatever you want to call it. They aren't allowed to go to cafes, they aren't allowed to go to pubs, they aren't allowed to go to restaurants, they can't work in some cases as well. So New South Wales has decided to drop that. When is Queensland going to drop that? And how did we get to this spot?
Yeah, I think it's a long journey of how we got here. But at the same time, it was, when they say, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, it was really small steps every single way. And I don't want to break Godwin's law here and start making comparisons with Nazi Germany, but it's probably the most common known sort of dictatorship that people can reference in their mind, is that post-war, when people were asked, well, how did you go along with these sort of things? And they're like, well, it was very incremental. There was one law, then another law, then another law, then another law. And again, I'm not saying we're in a dictatorship by any means, but we are starting to surrender some liberties and we are losing some freedoms, which is something that we should be able to just sit down and have a conversation about.
We used to have a saying, don't crap on McDonald's, okay? You knew if you were going to say something bad about McDonald's that there was going to be a salesperson in your studio within the minute, right?
Correct. Yep. And it's a little trick from print media as well, that companies learned very quickly that if they bought advertising space, that instantly silenced any criticism of them in the print media.
So I've been very careful to listen to as much as I can and study as much as I can all the different radio stations that are on, going from community through to ABC, commercial, all the above, then gone through the TV stations and done the same thing. Now, all of them have had paid ads on by the government regarding COVID-19. We've got ourselves a McDonald's situation right now. This is the situation where I don't think any of the announcers could say anything against the government because they are paying the wages at the moment. We know traditional radio and traditional TV have been doing it pretty tough against the internet of late. And so they're going to take any money that they can. And they're going to go, okay, what do we need to do to appease these people? So it feels like what we used to talk about China and everybody only gets what the government wants. Well, at this point in time, nobody can really speak badly about the government because there will be implications financially, right?
Absolutely. I know for a fact in the UK that prior to the entire COVID situation, that the government didn't even crack the top 20 of people who essentially spent money on advertising. It's now number one. So the government and advertising are essentially, they're the ones who are spending the most money out of all the companies, all the corporations to get their message out. And as you say, these companies taking this money, they're not going to be critical. They're not going to question. They're just going to go along with it. And so we have this situation now where voices are not being heard. They're being drowned out.
Every station that I would flick on would have something to do with COVID-19 and the government involved. Like every single station. But there was nowhere that was free of it. And if you have a listen today, if you want to check it yourself, here's the thing. You can do some homework yourself. If you don't believe us, go and have a listen. Flick through every station. And we probably listen a little bit more critically because we come from the industry. But have a listen yourself and just hear all those government ads and think, if I was being paid by a client, would I be talking badly about them? So that used to be the beautiful thing about living in Australia, is that you could say whatever you wanted. And 2018, 2019, we would say things about the government if we didn't agree with them. We would stand up. We're just not hearing it at the moment.
When the Soviet Union fell, there was a quote that always stuck in my mind where it said, now they'll go from elections that were rigged to elections that are now bought. And I really feel we're at that point now where the government is buying the media and they are very much in control of the narrative. And okay, we could make the case that they're doing this for our own good, for safety reasons. Okay. And I can certainly go along with that and I can buy that. But at the same time, what the issue is the precedent that it sets, that we allow them to dominate and control one way when it comes to communication. We're trusting that that communication is always going to be honest.
We're going to look at a number of stories today. One of them is dirty data. This is something you've been looking into, Baz?
Correct. There was an article on news.com.au on the 30th of December, and they made this point. National Cabinet will convene on Thursday to discuss a range of issues relating to the Omicron effect and the stresses a surging virus caseload has placed on the nation's testing and health regimes. This includes potential changes to the definition of what constitutes a close contact. So, if you can change the definition of what a close contact is, that then almost in one way erases the validity of the data that's come before it, because you're using two different measurements. You know, you're looking at apples now, you were looking at oranges before. Yeah, they're circular in shape, but they're completely, they're both fruit. However, they have different composition and there's different components to them, okay? So for them to do that now, what they're really saying here is that there's obviously a huge surge in cases in Victoria, in New South Wales, in Queensland right now. Everybody's opened up and we're seeing particularly with the arrival of Omicron, that cases are going through the roof. So what they're really saying now is we're going to change the way we record a close contact so that the data doesn't look as high as it does at this point. They're essentially going to weaken what it means to have a close contact so that they look good. Now, prior to this, the way that they were recording close contacts was about health and safety. Now it's about PR. That's the problem that we're talking about here when you have advertising and government come together, okay? I'm not sure that everybody knows this, but the way that they record a COVID death is essentially anybody who dies 28 days within recording a positive test. So that would mean if you died in a car accident, if you drowned at sea, if you committed suicide, any of these ways of actually passing on in life, it's not recorded as that particular form of death. It's recorded as a COVID death. So the data itself isn't clean. We have issues with the way that COVID deaths are recorded, and we now have an issue where they're openly saying we're essentially going to fudge the dials, we're going to mix the dials up, and what you're going to see is this amazing drop in close contact cases. Aren't we doing a fantastic job? When really, they've just essentially changed the method and the way that they're doing it.
It feels like they're just picking a crack team that they decide on to make some of these decisions. Like, we're not seeing a whole heap of different doctors come and talk about it. We're seeing like one doctor.
Correct. And this is where we really want to focus on our skill set and our background, is that both you and I, we're not doctors. We're not virologists.
No.
We're not people who have medical backgrounds in that sense. But we are people who have worked in the industry where the messages of those people are disseminated to the public. And this is where we come into it, because we've seen behind the curtain and we know how it works. And we know right now that the discussion's disappeared and it's become a one-way street. And that's really what we want to talk about.
I'm going to leave you with a few words here, Baz. Think openly.
Absolutely.